Well, we have made our way into a Wednesday, which means additional thoughts for the roots and things fall apart. For those of you who are intimately familiar with my merch, and you can see the top of my shirt right about there, you'll know that this is a great jam. Great jam. BobThePopUp.shop if you're interested in jams. And I wear this specifically to represent the album Things Fall Apart because it is a great jam. I said it as I was working my way through the reaction. I was getting toward the end. I said it at the end, and I will say it again now. In my opinion, this is the best produced album I've heard thus far. Now, this is where it's going to get a little weird, right? Because I say that, and then I'm going to say, this is not my favorite production. It is not my favorite thematically or in terms of creativity or whatever. But if you think of like a analogy, you think of like fighters, right? When they talk about two fighters that are in completely different weight classes that can't fight, but they analyze all the stats and what have you. And they talk about pound for pound, right? The best fighter. I think in terms of this album, using that analogy, note for note, production for production, however you want to break that term down, this album is the best I've heard in terms of production. I like to think of chemistry. I used to work in power plants and stuff, and usually you have to do like water chemistry. You have to check chemistry so that, certain piping isn't eroding and what have you. And you check things down to like 10 parts per million, 25 parts per million. And a lot of times you'll get like this range. It needs to be between 100 and 200 parts per million. Or sometimes they just give you a number, like where you want it to be, and then they say no higher than or no lower than. And every now and then you'll be working your shift and you're checking your chemistry, and it comes back right on spec, 25 parts per million. And it's like, yeah. And it never really matters. It's not like if you're at 29 instead of 25, but that's what this album production makes me think of, because it's just the right amount of everything that they use. And not to say that like every song is the best song I've ever heard, but just the amount of balance that goes into this album in terms of the sounds that they use, like Dynamite, just Dynamite having that little lo-fi pop in there. Oh, it's just perfect. It's perfect. It's like going to that super fancy restaurant and you get the special plate and it's all done up just right. And it's just like, this is perfect. And of course, it has to taste good as well. And it does. But there you go. So now, I say this is, I think, the best, but not necessarily my favorite. And think of, in terms of production, like thematically, I go, okay, I really like what's happening with the production with Food or Mad Villainy, because those really dive into the themes of those albums and kind of keep an aesthetic throughout. Production on To Pimp a Butterfly is fucking amazing. Illmatic production's really good. I love the beats on LP. Love them. Fucking amazing. JPEG Mafia, I think, he is my favorite artist currently, but in terms of production, I feel like he doesn't really get enough credit. But I say that, and I also think, well, I don't spend a lot of time in the sphere of where people talk about producers and who's the best and all this other stuff, but amazing beats is what JPEG Mafia makes. So there you go. There's that with the production and my experience with the album. Now, the other half of the album I really like because it took me a while to figure out what was going on. I was kind of criticizing the lyrics a little bit, or like the lack of message or whatever, and how these guys are talking about they're just great MCs and so on. But as I started to realize what this album actually is, I think it's on, without a doubt, he says, we're taking this back to the beginning of hip hop. And just the concept of, no, we're going to make an album that is based on the core of what hip hop has always been. Just rhymes, being a killer MC, coming up with creative ways to say things, brilliant production. And once I understood that, it really, I've never had an experience like this with this album, because it made me feel like I was being teleported back in time. The analogy I came up with was like video games and classic games being remastered really well. I'm a huge Diablo fan. I used to play Diablo 2 all the time. I loved it. And I feel like the Diablo 2 remaster is really well done. They basically took the same game and just put a graphical layer on top of it. So it's the same game, and it just looks incredible, which is nice because the original looks like garbage. Still plays well, but it looks like garbage. I feel like Things Fall Apart is classic, old school hip-hop remastered. And remastered really, really well. And it's nice because, I haven't heard a lot of these old albums. Old. Like pre-80s kind of thing, right? I can't go and experience that classic hip-hop style sound of, just people, being on the street or whatever, or in a little club, and they're, they got the basic kind of production going on, like minimal instruments, minimal sound, but it's all about the MC and guys going back and forth and rhyming with each other and battling with each other. And this album makes me feel like I can experience that a little bit. And it's really, really fucking cool. And it's what I also like, much like I had kind of this misconception about, rap in general when I first started about, it's about gang violence and it's about drugs and it's about all these things. I used to think the concept of like, we're from Philadelphia and we rep Philadelphia and blah, blah, because they say that a lot in this album. I used to think that was just kind of weird. Like I never really got that. I think a big part of that is because I've moved so much in my life. I've lived in the same spot, I think for the longest time. It's maybe been like 6 or 7 years. So I move a lot. As a kid, as an adult, I've moved. And so I've never really cared where anybody's from or where I'm from. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I actually went through like a small crisis when I went on vacation to Ireland and realized I had no roots. As I'm walking through this bar that was built in like 1462 and the stone steps are all worn down because people have been walking on them for hundreds of years. It was kind of a trippy experience. But it was kind of neat to like re-experience the concept of representing an area, representing a group, representing a neighborhood, whatever you want to call it. And being like, no, we hail from here. We're the best MCs. We're going to show you how good we are. And just going into the idea of different areas battling each other with MCs. And it's just cool. And I like it because it kind of takes this like purist element to it. I love stories. I love people, sharing their emotions and their experiences and all these different things in albums, right? And you guys know that. But there is something fun about kind of shedding all of that and just doing the technical work of, who can come up with the best rhymes, the coolest rhymes? How technical can you get? How much fun can you have playing around with the words and double meanings and all these different things? I don't know. It's just something. I have not had this experience with any other album thus far. And I'm so glad I did this one. It's honestly kind of surprising to me that I think it only got, 10,000 views or something like that. I don't think the roots are underground. Maybe they are underground. Maybe a lot of people haven't listened to them. I don't know why. Maybe it is the lack of message perhaps, or story, or who knows. Because that is pretty prevalent in hip hop. But there's just something really cool about Things Fall Apart. It is an experience that is to me, feels like a remastered travel back in time before all this evolution happened. It's kind of like the precipice of massive change, And I appreciate the comments. Unfortunately, I haven't had a time to reply to a lot of people. I've been so fucking busy, so I apologize because I like to reply and I haven't been able to these last couple weeks. I like the messages that people sent about how these guys weren't upset with gangster rap specifically. They were more upset with capitalism. Well, not necessarily capitalism, but record companies like swooping in and kind of forcing artists to have a certain image and say certain things just to rake in more money. Like pushing that idea. It wasn't so much the gangster rap or the stories that they were sharing, but more of the people trying to capitalize on top of that. So I appreciate that because that's a big distinction. It's important to understand. I'm honestly kind of surprised that You Got Me won the Grammy. But then I thought, well, it's a cool song. It kind of stays open-ended, so there's some intrigue there. Erykah Badu does a great job on it. it won the Grammy, and I feel like, okay, well, maybe it's because that's one of the songs that has a story to it, so it's easier to kind of push that one as a single. I love Dynamite. Dynamite, Double Trouble, 100% Dundee, Adrenaline, Don't See Us, The Spark. I mean, I like a lot of these songs. I don't really know which one my favorite is. I think Dynamite is probably my favorite. But then I look at Double Trouble. Then I look at Act 2, 100% Dundee, Adrenaline, You Got Me. That little guitar flair, or I'm sorry, Don't See Us. That little guitar flair in Don't See Us is incredible. I love Common's verse in Act 2. Love that verse. It's so good. It makes me want to listen to Common. A lot of people said you got to check out that album. I want to. There you go. There's my experience with The Roots. Things Fall Apart. Great album. Great album. So enjoyed it. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thursday is week 2 for February's Buog. 5 new artists, 10 new tracks. So please check it out if you can. 7 o'clock on YouTube. 7 o'clock Pacific. And then Friday is probably going to be Absol and Control System. Based on my schedule, that's a longer album. And the way my schedule works right now, I can probably do that one on Friday without ruining the rest of my weekend plans. And then the week after that, if nothing drops, will be Big Fish Theory. And then, who knows? Hopefully there's something coming. I haven't heard anything rumbling around, but that's what happened last month. And all of a sudden, Lil Yachty came out of nowhere and blew up everything, which was fun. Okay, y'all. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.